Attention all shoppers. I'm going to post this here for one reason and one reason only, because I am not a bad person. Yes, I had a few issues with family members growing up, nothing dramatic, and I've taken my fair share of teasing and bullying in high school, but there is absolutely nothing mentally wrong with me other than I've had enough. I know the media nowadays likes to take stories like mine and try to make some sort of illness or something to blame, but rest assured, all my eggs are in the right basket, whether you agree with me or not. Let me explain a little bit better. My name? Don't worry about it. Where I live? Don't worry about that either. The only details I will give you about myself are the following. 1. I work in a retail store that I'm 99.9% certain all of you have heard of, been to, and shopped at least once in your lives. I've worked there for several years now, having held various positions from cashier to backroom to shelf stocking to my most recent position, the customer service desk. And 2, up until very recently, I would have never dreamed of harming another person. I was raised to be well-mannered, sensitive, sympathetic, empathetic, caring, and helpful, and I continue to be most of the time. Multiple years in retail have given me the incredible skill of bottling up my emotions and hiding them super well. I could be boiling angry on the inside and still smiling and remaining cool as a cucumber on the outside. That said, it'd probably be good to give you some info on what exactly I do at my job. I know this is a lot of prefacing, but trust me, this is important for later. At the service desk where I work, we handle returns and refunds, process money transfers, cash checks, and sell and print money orders for customers. Sounds easy, right? Well, while the tasks themselves are not complicated in the slightest, the stupidity and attitudes of the customers make it challenging sometimes. Now, you do remember the golden rule from preschool? If not, the golden rule simply says, treat others the way you would like to be treated. Sounds fair, right? Well, maybe it's due to my upbringing in a mostly loving family combined with my strong desire as a child and even still in adulthood to make people happy, but I have always lived as if this was not a rule. To me, it was always the golden law, the north on my moral compass, if you will. And here I believe I can begin my story. Almost every Friday since I've been employed at the store, a particular woman has come in with whom I have many issues. I believe the first time I had the misfortune of meeting her, she threw her DVD case at me because I, as store policy and my manager dictated, refused her return of an open copy of Old Yeller. The only reason I remember this is because I was thinking to myself what a coincidence it was that an older lady was yelling at me about a movie called Old Yeller. I know, I'm corny. Whatever. Anyway, she insisted she wanted to return it because she never watched it again because it was too sappy for her. Fair enough, but permitted at our store. I smiled sympathetically and said, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. If you really want to get your money back for it, I suggest trying to sell it on eBay or something. It's easy, and you may end up even getting more money than you paid for it here. She snorted indignantly and told my manager that I was just trying to shut her up and get her to leave, to which my manager did nothing to reprimand me, but still, the nerve of this lady! I was just trying to help. Since then, she's been nothing but nasty to me. One time, when I was not looking, she stole my pen that I got while at my favorite vacation spot. Another time, she yelled at me in front of a whole line of customers because I was going too slow, and if I cannot do my job quick enough, then I should not be working here. To which everyone in line behind her agreed, making me so humiliated and angry inside. You have to understand, to this day, our registers are not that fast. They're old, outdated, and corporate refuses to upgrade. I can only work with what I've got, and I can only go as fast as my register can. I'm human. I imagine that I've been working there for several years now, though, and as they've gone by, they only made her more belligerent, rude, and ignorant. She was already over the hill in the early years of my career there, and over the last few years, she's been allegedly developing some medical issues, which, if you ask me, are bullshit. I honestly think she's just looking for attention because nowadays she'll come into the store with no cane, no limp, and virtually no signs of physical decline whatsoever. But then she'll take one of the electric scooter carts that our store has a courtesy to those who are really disabled. I'm not even lying. This bitch once told a young lady who had only one leg that she would have to wait if she wanted to use it because, as she said, I got here first. I know! What kind of raging fucking lunatic? So, now that I paint you a hopefully sufficient picture of how horrible this woman is to me and to many other associates with whom share retail tales, let me digress again to explain to you another key piece of information. I mentioned earlier that I had some issues with people in my family while I was growing up. However, this does not include my grandmother. She and I were incredibly close ever since I can remember, and I loved her more than just about everyone else in the world, with the exception of maybe my parents. Sadly, about 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with cancer and was given about 6 months tops to live. Fortunately for me, my grandmother was one of the most stubborn people to ever walk this earth and walked out of that doctor's office and did not come back for almost 2 years. After that, her health really took a turn for the worse, and I tried to spend as much time as possible with her because any second could have been her last, and I needed to be there for her. Of course, however, I still had bills to pay. College was expensive, car insurance and gas were expensive, and I had a maxed-out credit card with a boatload of money due to minimum payments every month. So, while I was at work, another family member would go up to my grandma's house to keep an eye on her and tend to her needs, with specific instructions to call my cell if anything were to give them reason to believe that her end was near. One night, the night that still stains my memory like red wine on white carpet, I was working from 1 p.m. until 10 p.m. It was a Friday, around 6, and as usual, the rude bitch I described earlier walked in and sat her ass down on one of the electric scooters, as always. She parked it in front of my register at the service desk and stood up, demanding that I, for the upteenth time, process a money transfer to send $500 to her daughter in Florida. I was just in the middle of counting the monster lady's money when I heard my phone ring loudly in my pocket. Panicked and fully shifting my focus from this miserable old bat to my phone, hoping that it was not bad news about my grandma, I dropped her money onto the counter and whipped out my phone. I looked at the caller ID to recognize the number was my aunt's, who was currently looking after my grandma. I instantly pressed answer, and my mouth went dry as cotton. I'll never forget how much my legs were shaking or how my stomach dropped as I put the phone to my ear. "Hello?" I asked, waiting for the worst news of my life. "Honey, I'm so sorry. It happened all so fast," was all that I heard my aunt say before I flipped it closed. I heard a loud ringing in my ears. My mouth was as dry as the desert floor, and I began to feel my face turn bright, bright red as it began to feel 100 or more degrees hotter than usual. At last, the tears. The tears poured down my cheeks like summer rain, and my legs, quaking like a shifting fault line, finally gave out. Right there, behind the service desk of the store, I began to cry like a baby. It finally happened. I remember to this day how I used to lay awake at night as a 5 or 6-year-old, terrified that my grandma was going to die someday, and now she had finally gone. It was the worst nightmare I could never wake up from, and I realized that my life was never going to be the same again. Naturally, the girl that was working at the register next to me knew exactly why I was crying. I was very open to my coworkers about how much I loved and cared about my grandma, and they were all on edge, praying for her health and my mental strength during these rough times. She didn't have to ask me. She just placed her hand on my shoulder, gently rubbed my back, and that's when I heard it. Excuse me? I'm still waiting here. What the hell's this little jerk's problem? I got a lot to do tonight." If I had to tell you who it was that said this, you have not been paying attention. Instantly, tears stopped coming out of my eyes. I swallowed every drop of sadness and forced myself to stand up. Everything, and I mean everything, from the ceiling to the floor to register buttons to the merchandise sitting on the shelves down the aisle across the service desk, suddenly had a red tint to it. Standing face to face with this bitch, I stretched my sleeves down past my wrists, dried my eyes, and choked out, "Nothing. I'm fine. I apologize." That was all I could spit out. One more word, and I would have lost it again, but I knew I had to finish this transaction. Would you like to know something funny? When you come to a store like the one I work at where you can send money to other countries and states, or cash a check, or return an item with a receipt, usually you're required to show some form of identification. While this thoughtless, ungrateful, unsympathetic, arrogant, ignorant, self-important, unbelievable bitch was standing at my register, proverbially kicking me while I was more than down I have ever been in my entire life after years and years of tormenting me over stupid, petty bullshit. There, propped up facing me in between a small crack in the lid of the receipt paper printer, sat this bitch's driver's license. I cracked, I admit it, but you know what? I don't regret what I did. Not in the least. I had the procedure for transferring money memorized to the point where I did not even have to look at the screen to know what I was doing, so while my fingers did the work, my eyes burned the image of this lady's name and address, which, duh, I'm not going to share and incriminate myself, into my memory bank. After I was certain that I had given myself enough time to remember the necessary information under the guise that my register was being slow, I finally gave the unsuspecting old hag her ID back, printed the receipt, collected her signature at the bottom, and told her to have a very nice night, and apologized again for the inconvenience my register and my emotions had caused her. There was no way in hell I was going to give her any actual excuse to get me in trouble at this job. At that point, one tiny negative comment toward her might have given within earshot a reason to suspect me of committing the atrocious crimes that I was secretly plotting. Once she had left, I removed my worker's vest, threw on my jacket, and clocked out, sputtering, "I have to go, Grandma," as I passed my manager on the walk out the door. I had driven to my grandma's house every single Sunday, and sometimes other days during the week too, for the last 6 years. Usually I would stop off at the food store and pick us up a carrot cake for dessert, or pull into the flower shop's parking lot and get her a dozen roses just to make her smile. This time, however, it felt like I was driving an entire world away. Every car that I got stuck behind seemed to be going 50 miles per hour too slow. Every red light I had to stop at seemed to be 10 times longer than they normally did. And when I finally arrived and parked outside her house, it seemed like a complete stranger's house. The house that I had come to feel more at home at than even the house I'd grown up in now felt so sorrowful, depressing, and cold. I ascended the front porch steps, opened the front door, and shoved aside family members who were already there and trying to console me and brace me for the impact of the sight of the cold, shriveling corpse of the woman who was not only my grandmother, but my very best friend in the entire world. I walked into her bedroom, saw her lying there under her blankets, limply snuggling the stuffed dog that resembled her old puppy Bella, and immediately broke down. I felt like I had failed her by not being there. I felt like I betrayed her, and I promised myself that I would never forgive myself for not being able to say goodbye. I should have done more. I don't know exactly what I could have done, but I could have figured something out, somehow, that would have allowed me to be there the moment she decided that her cancer was finally too much to bear, and that it was time to depart from this world. I know that if it was her choice, she would have waited to see me too, but it was my responsibility to be there for her, not the other way around. The funeral was beautiful. I've never seen so many people in one small room, and I've never seen so many people crying in the same room. She touched so many lives in so many ways. That night, my family and I had a party in her honor that consisted of 3 cases of beer and a pyramid of empty cans that reached the chandelier hanging above the kitchen table. We told stories and shared memories of her, and did the best we could to help each other through this terrible, terrible tragedy. Something was still nagging at me in the back of my mind, though. That bitch. The way she had disrespected me the night my grandma passed away was unforgivable. It was the very last straw. She needed to be taught a lesson, and at the funeral I vowed in a prayer while kneeling before my grandma's urn that rude, selfish monster would regret the day she had ever been rude to me. So I began planning and planning, and one night I went shopping for the equipment I needed to bring my swift iron fist to justice. I bought a few feet of rope, and a bucket from one store, a collapsible folding chair from another, a baseball bat from another, and some razor wire from another.